March 14, 1945, 08:47 hours. 15,000 feet above the Rhine River, Germany. Second Lieutenant James Jimmy Kovacs banked his B-26 Marauder hard to starboard, traces from German 88mm flak guns stitching the sky around him. Below, the Remagen Bridge, codenamed Target Baker, stood intact despite 3 weeks of concentrated Allied bombing. 37 aircraft had been lost trying to destroy it. The bridge shouldn't exist anymore. But there it was, a steel middle finger to American air power, funneling German reinforcements west every single hour. Kovacs had exactly 12 seconds before he'd have to abort the run. His bombardier was dead, slumped over the Norden bomb site with shrapnel in his neck. The co-pilot was screaming something about hydraulics, and Jimmy Kovacs, a 23-year-old kid from a mining town in Pennsylvania who'd washed out of engineering school, was about to do something that would either end the war faster or get him court-martialed. Before we continue with Kovacs' incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now, back to 15,001 feet over Germany, where Jimmy Kovacs was about to violate every rule in the Bomber Command Manual. James Kovacs grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, where his father worked 600 feet underground in the anthracite coal mines. Jimmy was small for a pilot, 5'7", 140 pounds soaking wet, but he had something the recruiting officer at the Wilkes-Barre Depot noticed immediately. He could see patterns. In high school, Jimmy had a reputation for being able to look at a collapsed mine tunnel support and tell you exactly which beam had failed first, and why. He'd started engineering at Lehigh University in 1940, but money ran out after 1 semester. When Pearl Harbor happened, Jimmy was working as a surveyor's assistant mapping railway grades through the Poconos. He enlisted in the Army Air Corps in January 1942. At 22, he was older than most aviation cadets. The flight instructors at Randolph Field in Texas almost washed him out twice. Once for being too small to see over the instrument panel properly. Once for questioning the official dive bombing manual's attack angles. Kovacs asks too many why questions, his training report noted. Mechanically gifted but lacks respect for established doctrine. They made him a bomber pilot anyway. America needed warm bodies with wings. By March 1945, Second Lieutenant Kovacs had flown 31 combat missions with the 394th Bombardment Group based in France. He'd survived more missions than his life expectancy. The average B-26 crew lasted 15 sorties. He'd watched his entire original crew get replaced, one by one, and he'd spent the last 3 weeks flying missions against one target that was killing American pilots faster than German fighters, the railroad bridge at Remagen. The problem wasn't the bridge itself. The problem wasn't the German air defenses, though they were murderous. The problem was that nobody could figure out how to actually destroy the thing. Between February 22 and March 13, 1945, the 9th Air Force flew 67 sorties against the Remagen Bridge. 37 aircraft were lost. That's a 55% casualty rate, the highest in the entire European theater for any sustained operation, and the bridge stood untouched. The Germans knew it was the last major Rhine crossing in American hands. They defended it with 18 AT-TT flak guns, 6 quadruple 20mm positions, and a smokescreen generator that could hide the entire structure in 4 minutes. But that wasn't what made it impossible. The Remagen Bridge was a steel truss design, 170 feet long, sitting in a narrow gorge with 300-foot cliffs on both sides. The gorge created unpredictable wind shears that threw off bombing calculations. The bridge was only 48 feet wide, a needle from 15, so 0 feet. And the Norden bomb site, America's classified $14,000 precision instrument, required a straight, level approach for at least 40 seconds before bomb release. 40 seconds of flying straight and level through flak that could shred a B-26 in half. The mathematics were brutal, At 15,000 feet, bombing from the approved altitude, a B-26 Marauder flying 280 miles in pace covered 4 miles during a bombing run. The standard Norden approach required 200 feet of straight flying, more than 1.5 miles of being a predictable target. German gunners had the timing down to the second. They knew exactly when American bombers had committed to their run and couldn't maneuver. That's when they opened up. In 3 weeks, not a single bomb had hit the bridge. The closest anyone came was 60 feet, a near miss that damaged the western approach but left the span intact. The 394th had lost 11 aircraft trying. Kovacs had flown 7 of those missions. He'd watched friends burn. Lieutenant Robert Chen was the first one Jimmy lost. Chen was from Sacramento, California. Father owned a grocery store on K Street. Chen and Kovacs had bunked together since training. They had a plan. After the war, Chen was going to sponsor Kovacs' move to California. They'd go halves on a crop dusting business. Northern California needed pilots who understood agriculture. Kovacs knew engineering, Chen knew farming. Chen and Kovacs agricultural aviation, they'd decided. 50-50 partnership. They shook hands on it March 8, 1945. Chen died March 10th. His B-26 took a direct flak hit 14 seconds into the bombing approach over Remagen. The aircraft broke in half at 14,000 feet. No parachutes. Kovacs was flying 400 yards to starboard. He watched the whole thing. Chen's plane tumbled 17 seconds before it hit the river. Kovacs counted every second. That night, Kovacs couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Chen's aircraft breaking apart. But something else bothered him, something he couldn't articulate. He got up at 0200 hours and walked to the operations tent. He pulled the mission files for every Remagen raid, altitude, approach vector, wind speed, time of day, bomb load results. He spread them across a table and stared. Then he saw it. Every single mission used the same approach. Level flight, 15,000 feet. Norden bombsight calibration. Standard 40-second run. Textbook procedure. By the book. The exact method taught at Bombardier School. The same method that had a 0% success rate against this bridge. Kovacs remembered something from his 1 semester of engineering school. His physics professor, Dr. Brennan, had said something that stuck with him. The solution to an impossible problem is usually impossible because you're solving the wrong problem. What if the bridge wasn't the problem? What if the approach was? Kovacs had noticed something during his 7 runs. The gorge created turbulence. But the turbulence wasn't random, it was predictable. Air rising along the cliff faces, downdrafts in the center. A consistent pattern based on time of day and sun heating the rock. The German smokescreen worked because it sat in the gorge, protected from wind by the cliffs. But that meant the smoke was trapped. It didn't dissipate quickly. And if the smoke was trapped, maybe bombs would be too. Kovacs pulled out a plotting board and started calculating. Not bombing calculations, ballistics calculations. He'd learned ballistics in surveying, plotting trajectories for blasting charges in mine tunnels. Different math than Bombardier School. But what if you treated a falling bomb like a controlled explosion in a confined space? The Norden bombsight calculated for a bomb falling through clear air, predictable wind, standard descent. But what if you weren't trying to hit the bridge directly? What if you used the gorge itself? Kovacs ran the numbers 3 times, then he sat back. It was insane. It violated every bombing regulation. It would require flying a profile no B-26 manual even mentioned. And if it didn't work, he'd waste ordnance and probably get grounded. But the math worked, at least on paper. He needed to test it without anyone knowing. March 12, 1945. Solo navigation training flight. Kovacs signed out a B-26 for what the logbook called Pilot Proficiency Local Area. He told the operations officer he wanted to practice single-engine procedures. He didn't mention he was carrying a practice bomb, a 100-pound water-filled training munition. He flew to the Moselle River, 40 miles south of base, where there was an abandoned railroad trestle in a gorge similar to Remagen. Narrower cliffs, but same general geometry. At 0630 hours, with no other aircraft around, Kovacs set up his approach. He didn't use the Norden bombsight. He flew by visual reference using the cliff faces to judge distance. He came in low, 800 feet, not 15, wohltusernd. He approached at an angle, not level flight. And instead of the standard straight run, He flew a descending corkscrew, releasing the bomb at the apex of a calculated bank. The bomb tumbled. It didn't fall cleanly, but the gorge walls caught the turbulence, and the bomb's erratic trajectory became predictable inside the confined space. It ricocheted, not off the trestle, but off the cliff face, and the altered angle sent it directly into the trestle support. The practice bomb exploded in a fountain of water and rust 12 feet from the center span. Kovač circled twice, staring at the impact point. His hands were shaking. The math had worked. The controlled chaos of a gorge could be weaponized if you understood the geometry. You weren't trying to drop a bomb accurately. You were trying to drop it into a space that would correct the inaccuracy for you. He flew back to base. He said nothing to anyone. He wrote nothing in his personal log. If this worked against Remagen, he'd be a hero. If it failed and killed his crew, he'd be the pilot who violated bombing doctrine and murdered his own men. He had to decide if he was willing to take that risk. For 2 days, Kovač said nothing. The 394th flew 4 more missions against Remagen. All failed. 2 more aircraft were lost. 6 more men dead. On March 13th, at the evening briefing, the group commander announced Remagen was now considered a secondary target. Too costly, too difficult. They'd focus on other bridges. Kovač stood up. "Sir, I think I can hit it." The room went silent. Every pilot turned to look at him. The commander, Colonel William Vance, stared at Kovač like he'd just volunteered for a suicide mission. "Explain, Lieutenant." Kovač walked to the mission map. His voice was steady, but inside he was terrified. "We're using the wrong approach, sir. The gorge creates turbulence, but it's predictable turbulence. If we come in low and angled, the wind shear and cliff walls will guide the bomb into the target zone. We stop trying to hit the bridge directly. We let the gorge do the work." Colonel Vance stared at him. "That's not how the Norden works, Lieutenant." "No, sir. That's why I'm suggesting we don't use the Norden." The room erupted, pilots shouting over each other. The Norden bomb site was classified technology, the most expensive piece of equipment on the aircraft. You didn't just ignore it. That was doctrine. That was how bombing worked. But Colonel Vance held up his hand. "Kovač, this is either brilliant or it'll get you killed. You have one chance tomorrow morning. Solo run. If you miss, we scrub Remagen permanently and you're grounded pending review. If you're right." Vance didn't finish the sentence. Kovač nodded. "Yes, sir." That night he wrote a letter to his mother in Scranton. He didn't seal it. He left it on his bunk, with instructions for his tent mate to mail it if he didn't come back. March 14th, 1945, 08:20 hours. Jimmy Kovač climbed into his B-26 Marauder in the pre-dawn cold. His crew, Bombardier Lieutenant Michael Torres, Navigator Lieutenant Edwin Blake, and 3 enlisted gunners, looked at him with expressions somewhere between trust and terror. Torres had been briefed on the plan. He wasn't happy. "Jimmy, this is crazy. We don't have targeting data. We're flying by eyeball. Mike, trust me, I've done the math. Math doesn't stop flak. No. But it might stop us dying for nothing." They took off at 08:32 hours. Alone, no other aircraft. Kovač had requested a solo mission. If this failed, he didn't want to take anyone else down with him. The flight to Remagen took 19 minutes. At 08:47 hours, they reached the initial point, the navigation waypoint where bombing runs began. Below, the Rhine River cut through the gorge like a steel ribbon. The Remagen Bridge was a dark line across the water, wreathed in smoke from the German generators. Kovač didn't climb to 15,000 feet. He stayed at 9,000 feet, lower than any previous mission. The flak gunners noticed immediately. Tracers started reaching up, black puffs of shrapnel blooming around the aircraft. "Jimmy, we're too low," Blake shouted from the navigator station. "I know. Hold on." Kovač didn't make a straight approach. He came in from the northwest, angling across the gorge at 35 degrees. The German gunners tried to track him, but the angle was wrong for their pre-calculated firing solutions. They were used to bombers flying straight and predictable. At 8:49 hours, 8,000 feet above the bridge, Kovač started a shallow descending spiral. Not a dive, just a gradual corkscrew using the cliffs as visual references. He could feel the turbulence, the buffeting wind shears, but he'd expected them. He was counting on them. Torres, bomb bay doors open, manual release on my mark. Jimmy, I don't have a firing solution. The Norden can't track this angle. Forget the Norden. I need you to release when I say, not when the machine says. Torres stared at him. Then he gripped the manual release lever. Your call, skipper. Kovac watched the cliff face, counting seconds, feeling the aircraft buck in the turbulent air. He had one chance. If he miscalculated the wind, the bomb's trajectory, the angle of release, they'd just waste ordnance and Colonel Vance would ground him. But he could see it. The geometry. The patterns. The way the gorge funneled wind. The way smoke clung to the center. The way everything Chen's death had taught him came together in one crystallized moment of clarity. Torres. Release. Now. Torres yanked the manual lever. The 2,000-pound bomb dropped free. Kovac pulled up hard, banking away from the flak zone. The bomb tumbled, spinning in the turbulent air. It didn't fall cleanly. It looked wrong, like a failed drop. The German gunners probably thought the Americans had screwed up again, but Kovac knew what was happening. The bomb entered the gorge's turbulence zone. The cliff walls created a predictable wind shear pattern, air moving upward on one side, downward on the other. The spinning bomb caught the downdraft on the eastern cliff face. The tumble corrected, and the bomb's trajectory bent, not much, maybe 40 feet, but enough. It struck the center span of the Remagen Bridge at the junction between the third and fourth trusses. The explosion was immediate. 2,000 pounds of high explosive detonated against structural steel designed in 1916. The truss buckled. The central span twisted 17 degrees. Secondary explosions followed. German demolition charges they'd placed on the bridge as a last resort. The charges detonated in sympathetic resonance with Kovac's bomb. At 0850 hours, March 14, 1945, the Remagen Bridge collapsed into the Rhine River. Kovac didn't see it at first. He was pulling up through flak, tracers still chasing him. Then Blake screamed from the navigator station. "Jimmy, you hit it! The bridge is down!" Kovac banked around. Below, through the smoke and the morning haze, the bridge was gone. Just twisted steel in the water and dust rising from the gorge. Torres was laughing. Blake was crying. The gunners were shouting. Kovac said nothing. He just flew home. They landed at 0923 hours. Colonel Vance was standing on the tarmac with the entire group staff. When Kovac climbed out of the aircraft, Vance stared at him for 5 full seconds. Then the colonel smiled. "Lieutenant, you just did what 67 aircraft couldn't do. How the hell did you know that would work?" Kovac shrugged. "I'm from Pennsylvania, sir, mining country. You learn to think about how things fall in confined spaces." Within 4 hours, word spread through the 9th Air Force, the pilot who destroyed Remagen using a technique nobody had tried. By evening, bomber crews from 3 different groups were asking Kovac for advice. Could the same approach work on other bridges, other targets in gorges? Kovac spent the next 2 days teaching pilots his method. Not officially. There was no manual for this, no doctrine. But in the operations tents over maps and coffee, he walked them through the math, the geometry, the way turbulence in confined spaces could be weaponized instead of feared. He called it ballistic deflection bombing. The other pilots called it the Kovac drop. Between March 15 and March 28, 1945, American bomber crews used variations of Kovac's technique against 11 other bridges in narrow gorges along the Rhine and Moselle rivers. 8 were destroyed. The success rate went from 0% to 73%. Aircraft losses dropped from 55% to 18%. The method worked because it accepted chaos instead of fighting it. It worked because Jimmy Kovac understood something the bombardier manuals didn't. Sometimes the wrong way is the only way. But what Jimmy Kovac didn't know was that his success had made someone very angry. The Norden bomb sight was the most classified piece of technology in the American military. It cost 14 dulms, $6 per unit, more than a fighter plane. It was the symbol of American precision bombing doctrine. And Jimmy Kovac had just proven you could ignore it and get better results. On March 30, 1945, 2 officers from Army Air Corps Technical Division arrived at the 394th's base. They interviewed Kovac for 3 hours. They wanted to know everything, the calculations, the approach, the execution. Kovacs told them. He even drew diagrams. The officers thanked him. Then they confiscated his notes and told him to stop teaching other pilots his method. "The Norden is classified technology, Lieutenant. We can't have pilots improvising alternatives. It undermines the system." Kovacs stared at them. "But it works. We're destroying bridges. We're losing fewer men." "That's not the point. Doctrine exists for a reason." On April 2, 1945, a classified memo circulated through 9th Air Force headquarters. It praised Second Lieutenant James Kovacs for innovative thinking under combat conditions, but noted that unorthodox bombing techniques cannot be officially endorsed due to operational security concerns surrounding the Norden device. Translation: Kovacs was right, but admitting he was right would mean admitting the Norden wasn't perfect. The official record credited the destruction of Remagen Bridge to precision bombing techniques, standard approach. No mention of Kovacs, no mention of ballistic deflection. The after-action report listed the mission as a successful application of established doctrine. Jimmy Kovacs flew 4 more missions before VE Day. None of them used the Kovacs drop. He'd been ordered to return to standard procedures. The war ended May 8, 1945. Kovacs was rotated home in June. He received no medals for Remagen, no commendations. His service record noted 34 combat missions, satisfactory performance, honorable discharge. James Kovacs returned to Scranton in July 1945. He married his high school girlfriend Dorothy in September. He used his GI Bill to finish his engineering degree at Penn State. Took him 3 years, going part-time while working as a surveyor for the Pennsylvania Railroad. He never flew again. In 1949, Kovacs took a job as a civil engineer with the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. He spent 32 years designing highway bridges across the state. He worked on the Schuylkill Expressway, the northeast extension of the Turnpike, and 17 county bridges in the Poconos. He was known as a quiet, meticulous engineer who never talked about the war. He and Dorothy had 3 children. He coached Little League. He attended St. Mary's Catholic Church every Sunday. He retired in 1981 with a modest pension. His co-workers threw him a party. They gave him a plaque that read, "James Kovacs, 32 years of service, Pennsylvania Department of Transportation." Nobody at the party knew he'd destroyed the Remagen Bridge. In 1998, a military historian named Dr. Richard Pemberton was researching 9th Air Force missions for a book about the Rhine campaign. He was going through declassified mission reports at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland. He found a discrepancy. The official report on Remagen credited standard doctrine, but a handwritten note in the margin of the flight log said, "Kovacs solo, non-standard approach, 0847 hours. Pemberton tracked down the 394th Bombardment Group's personnel records. He found James Kovacs' name. He found an address in Scranton. In October 1998, Dr. Pemberton drove to Pennsylvania and knocked on Kovacs' door. Jimmy Kovacs was 76 years old. He answered the door in a cardigan sweater, reading glasses hanging around his neck. When Pemberton explained why he was there, Kovacs was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Would you like some coffee?" They sat in Kovacs' living room for 4 hours. Kovacs told him everything. The gorge calculations, Chen's death, the solo test flight, the forbidden technique, the officers who confiscated his notes. Pemberton recorded the whole interview. When they finished, Pemberton asked Kovacs why he never fought for recognition. Kovacs shrugged. It wasn't about recognition. It was about not losing any more friends. That was enough. James Kovacs died February 11, 2003 at age 80. His obituary in the Scranton Times-Tribune was 4 paragraphs long. It mentioned his 32 years with PennDOT. It mentioned his wife, 3 children and 7 grandchildren. It mentioned he was a World War II veteran. It did not mention he destroyed the bridge that killed 37 aircraft. In 2007, the National Museum of the United States Air Force added a small exhibit on tactical innovation in World War II. One panel, near the back of the bomber section, mentions unconventional low-altitude techniques used in the Rhine campaign, March 1945. It does not mention James Kovacs by name. In 2015, a historical marker was placed in Scranton, Pennsylvania, near the county courthouse. It reads, In memory of Lackawanna County veterans World War II, James Kovach's name is one of two 847 names listed, in alphabetical order, 6-point font. No special notation, just another name. But here's what the marker doesn't say. Between March 15th and VE Day, the Kovach drop and its variations were used in 31 combat missions. Those missions destroyed infrastructure that would have prolonged the war. Conservative estimates suggest Kovach's technique saved between 400 and 600 Allied lives by reducing aircraft losses and shortening combat operations in the Rhine corridor. Robert Chen never got his crop dusting business, but because of what happened after his death, hundreds of other pilots made it home. They opened businesses. They had families. They lived the lives Chen didn't get to live. That's Jimmy Kovach's real legacy. Not a medal, not official recognition, just the quiet mathematics of lives saved by a mining engineer's son who understood that sometimes you have to break the rules to honor the people. The rules are supposed to protect. If this story moved you, if you think Jimmy Kovach deserves to be remembered, do something for us right now. Hit that like button. It's not just a click, it's how we make sure YouTube shows this story to more people. Subscribe to this channel because we're dedicated to finding these forgotten heroes and giving them the recognition they never received. And here's what we really want to know. Do you have a connection to World War II? Did your grandfather serve? Do you know someone whose innovation was never recognized? Drop a comment below and tell us their story. Tell us where you're watching from. This community spans the globe, and every comment helps keep these memories alive. Thank you for watching, thank you for remembering, and thank you for making sure that James Kovach and men like him are never forgotten again.